I remember nothing of the fall, only the aftermath. White light stabbing my eyelids, the taste of metal in my mouth, voices running like distant thunder. Then one voice cut through. "This is St. Mary Say. Your father has collapsed. He's unconscious. You need to come." A pause. A cold reply. "I'm busy. Handle it." The line went dead. The silence that followed was louder than any siren. That was my son. My only son. And in that sterile room with machines keeping time for me, I understood something I had refused to admit for years. I was no longer a father to him, only a burden. In that cold silence, I made a decision. I would not die here. I would live. He had no idea that from this hospital bed, his reckoning had already begun. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights above hummed. A nurse leaned over me. Her face blurred her lips, moving with words I couldn't catch. My chest burned each time the oxygen tube forced air into me, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the drip, drip of an IV bag. Time was suspended. "Mr. Hayes, can you hear me?" Her voice finally broke through. I tried to nod. My head weighed more than a stone, but the effort drew a smile from her. "Good. You're with us." With us? The word struck me oddly because even surrounded by machines and strangers in white coats, I'd never felt more alone. Hours, or maybe minutes, slipped by. Pain blurred the edges of time. I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to retreat inward. I thought of Matthew, my son. I pictured his face at 10 years old, freckles across his nose, laughing as he kicked a football across the yard. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who could dismiss his father's life with 4 words. "I'm busy. Handle it." A doctor approached. His voice carried the authority of someone used to delivering truths others didn't want to hear. "You gave us a scare, Mr. Hayes. Blood pressure crash. Possible minor stroke. You'll need observation. Is there anyone we should contact?" "Family." I let the silence stretch. He already knew who they had called. I finally whispered, "No one's coming." The doctor's brow furrowed, but he didn't press. He just scribbled on his clipboard and walked away. The sound of his pen scratching the paper was louder to me than the monitor's beeps. Pacing slowed here, the reality sinking in. I had raised a son who couldn't even walk into a hospital lobby when I was one step from death. What had I done wrong? Where had the years gone? I reached for the bedside table. My wallet sat there, returned by the paramedics. Inside, a folded photograph waited. My late wife, Ellen, holding Matthew as a boy. She had been gone 15 years. Since then, I had poured everything into raising him alone. School fees, late shifts, mortgage sacrifices. Ellen never got to see. And for what? The twist came quietly. I realized I had already given him more than any parent should. Not just money, not just time, but my very sense of worth. And he had squandered it, reshaped it into entitlement. The nurse returned, placing a glass of water by my bed. Her kindness almost undid me. "Your son? He's not coming?" she asked gently. I managed a faint smile. "He has priorities." She frowned as though she wanted to say more, but instead adjusted my IV and left. The door clicked shut, leaving me in the mechanical chorus of beeps and drips. That was when clarity came, not through anger, but through a stillness sharper than rage. If Matthew saw me as nothing but a burden, then he had already buried me in his mind. But I was not done, not by a long stretch. I began to test my body inch by inch. My right hand trembled as I tried to flex it, numb but moving. My legs ached like anchors, but I shifted them beneath the blanket. Each motion was a declaration. "I am still here," a voice inside me whispered. "Survive first, then reckon." The hours of the night became my crucible. I wrote in my mind the ledger Matthew had opened with his indifference. Every betrayal tallied, every cold shoulder recorded. And I promised myself this. I would not repay him in fury. I would repay him in truth. Cold, undeniable truth. Morning bled into the room through half-open blinds. The world outside continued. Cars, honking birds, calling life unpausing without me. I asked for paper and a pen. The nurse hesitated, then fetched them. When I held that pen, my hand shook at first, then steadied. Words flowed not of anger, but of clarity. Day 1 alive. Matthew is not here. Remember this silence. It was the beginning of something. Not a diary, not a confession, a record, a weapon forged in ink. Later, a young intern checked on me. His curiosity got the better of him. "Mr. Hayes, forgive me for asking, but why isn't your son here? You're lucky we found you when we did." I met his gaze. My voice was calm. "Luck had nothing to do with it. Some things are meant to break, so you can see what they're made of." He blinked, unsure what to say, and left, but I could see in his eyes the impression had landed. Words matter. Even in weakness, I had power. As night fell again, I lay listening to the machines. Each beep was no longer a reminder of fragility, but of time granted. Each second another chance to prepare. Matthew thought I was powerless here, but he had underestimated the resolve of a man who had already walked through fire, once losing a wife, raising a child alone, surviving years of quiet struggle. This hospital bed was not my grave. It was my launch pad. The pacing quickened toward the end of part 1, drawing us closer to the decision point. My body was weak, but my mind sharpened with every breath. I looked at the photograph of Ellen again. I imagined her voice. "Richard, don't let him write your ending." No, this was my story, and it was far from over. I closed the notebook, placed the pen carefully on top, and let the room fall into darkness. The steady drip of the IV shifted in my mind, into the steady patter of rain on a rooftop from years ago. That sound pulled me back to another time, another memory, another choice. And just like that, the scene began to dissolve, carrying me into the first of many flashbacks that would shape what was to come. I lay there, eyes closed, listening to the IV drip reshape itself into rain on a familiar roof. Not the hospital's roof. Ours, the little cape on Maple Street, where the gutters always choked with oak leaves every October, where the dryer rattled like it had marbles stuck in its lungs, where I could fix anything, except the one thing that mattered. The smell of antiseptic thinned, and the air in my head turned to dish soap, and hot coffee, and a linoleum floor that never quite looked clean, no matter how hard Ellen scrubbed. Memory isn't a straight road. It's a series of doors that open when you touch the handle without meaning to. The handle I touched was that sound. Steady water, steady time, steady proof that I was still here long enough to walk back to where I started losing my son. Maple Street was never fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath a yard, big enough to teach a boy to throw a ball, and small enough that mowing it counted as a chore he could finish before sunset. I was 28 when we signed that mortgage, a private in the motor pool, not long turned into a civilian, with a tan line where the watch used to sit, and a toolbox I could carry all day. Ellen worked the front desk at Dr. Hargra's clinic. She knew every kid's rash, and every grandmother's blood pressure in a 3 mi radius. The nurses loved her. The old men flirted. She would roll her eyes and draw a heart in the corner of her sticky notes. Anyway, we didn't need much then. Just a car that started, a roof that held, and a Sunday with no calls. When Matthew came, the house changed size. Same square footage, different universe. The walk from crib to sink felt like a march across a county line. The budget grew teeth. We took a red Sharpie to the calendar and circled due dates. We bought a second-hand stroller that scuffed our shins on every uneven crack, and a crib whose instructions looked like a foreign language, except the last step: tighten all fasteners. I knew that part on instinct. There are days I will keep like coins. One of them a Tuesday in March, when Matthew was 5. The old fan in the kitchen squeaked. The radio played a song from before any of us had gray hair, and outside the window, the rain came down the way it does when spring and winter argue. I had my boots off by the back door. Ellen handed me a coffee, kissed me, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear the way she always did. Matthew sat on the floor with a box of crayons and an index card. "What's that, buddy?" I asked. "A list," he said. "Of what?" "What? I want to be football player, astronaut, dinosaur." Ellen laughed so hard she snorted. 2 out of 3 is not bad. I keep that laugh like a photo I never took. We were not a family that argued loudly. I was raised by a man who thought silence was how you kept peace, and a mother who believed casseroles fixed all disagreements. But life doesn't care about your family rules. Life is a contractor with a clipboard marking change orders you didn't ask for. The first change order was subtle. Ellen got tired. Everyone gets tired. But this was tired like a curtain lowering. She'd come home from the clinic and sit in her car for 10 minutes before coming in, eyes closed, hands on the wheel. "Long day?" I'd ask. "Just old bones," she'd say, and smile like a paper cut. "You don't want your kid to see." I told myself it was nothing. A good husband carries the heavy things. So I carried denial like a bag of salt through February. The second change order was louder. Ellen fainted at the sink on a Sunday. Matthew was 7. The coffee mug shattered and skated across the floor. I caught her before she hit the tile. The ER smelled like this one: bleach and bad news. Dr. Hargrave came to the bay himself. White hair, wild eyes, gentler than I wanted them to be. "We found something," he said. And the world went to a high ringing for a while. We didn't have the language for cancer, so we borrowed it quickly. Stages, cells, margins, options. Ellen looked at me on the way home and said, "You don't have to be a hero. Just be here." I said, "I'm not going anywhere." We tried to keep Matthew's life as soft as possible. I took overtime with the county maintenance department, patching potholes in April and fixing boilers that coughed their last breath every first cold snap. I learned the schedules of school buses and chemo chairs. I learned to stretch ground beef into 3 dinners, and to act like I didn't see the envelope from the radiation bill when I put the mail on the table. Matthew learned to tie his shoes without look at Malukatma, and do homework at the kitchen counter, while his mother napped 10 feet away. He also learned something I didn't see then, that I would always cover the shortfall, always quiet the noise, always fill the gaps between what we had and what was needed. It looks like love because it is. It also looks like training. There is a memory I've never said out loud. Matthew hiding behind the pantry door at 9 fingers in the sugar jar, eyes guilty and bright. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Nothing," he said with sugar on his lip. "Your nothing is sweet," I replied. "Close the jar. Rinse your mouth." He looked at me for a second, testing the fence, then closed it, rinsed, and hugged me like the punishment he escaped needed a place to go. It was nothing. It was everything. The year I turned 43, Ellen stopped making lists. People forget that dying happens long before it looks like it. She left sticky notes in places like she knew she wouldn't be there to answer the questions. Matthew's socks in top drawer. Trash day Wednesday. Call insurance about referral. Don't forget to eat. That last one made me angry in a way I couldn't confess, angry at the universe for using my wife's handwriting to tell me how to be alive without her. She passed in a room where the blinds were drawn just enough to show slices of sky. It was quiet. That's how she would have wanted it. My strongest memory from that day is walking out to the parking lot with a plastic bag of her belongings, a scarf, a watch with a cracked face, 3 hair ties, and a paperback novel she never finished. The sun was bright and stupid. Birds were arguing on a wire.